Now time for our final speaker, Katie Crook Davies. Katie is co-founder and managing director at T+1, the next generation actuarial modelling platform for protection, powering pricing, valuation and capital calculations. These processes are foundational for businesses, and Katie believes that with a modern modelling infrastructure, insurers and reinsurers can unlock amazing new capabilities and growth in the protection market. She's here to tell us about new possibilities. Please welcome Katie to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. I promise I will keep it relatively light on the actuarial side, so fear not. So this whole session is about inclusivity, and nobody can argue that about being inclusive. It's morally the right thing to do, of course. And we also know that it makes sense from a workplace perspective, although we still have quite a way to go. I think about the stat Pauline quoted about gender parity being over 130 years away, which is pretty terrifying. But in this session, I want to address the elephant in the room. So inclusivity has to make business sense. It has to be financially viable and sustainable for insurers, because I think it's impossible for us as an industry to continue offering the fantastic cover solutions that we do if those solutions don't make money. Ultimately, they will fail. So today I want to look at why inclusivity is a bit of a challenge for us as an industry today, and provide some food for thought and possible ways to rethink things to give us a more inclusive future. So we've heard from Lauren there, and I don't want to kind of go over old ground regarding microinsurance and how excellent it is from an inclusivity perspective. And I agree with her point that there's probably opportunity in the UK for products like that, but we don't tend to see microinsurance in the UK. And I think just to kind of go over why that is. So obviously the customer bases look quite different at the moment. Generally, the needs for financial protection are quite different. Our customers tend to have higher incomes, higher levels of financial literacy compared to the typical microinsurance customer. Our customers tend to face a higher cost of living, so that the lower levels of cover provided by microinsurance may not meet those needs perfectly. We're really fortunate, of course, in this country to have support through our employers, through our workplaces if we were to fall ill, through the government as well, although perhaps we're sometimes guilty of overestimating what we might get in those situations. And sadly, that's not a luxury for many who are in the developing microinsurance markets. So there's a difference in terms of need, and because of that, our propositions tend to look quite different as well. So we tend to provide high levels of cover, comprehensive options to meet complex needs of our customers. Microinsurance levels tend to be a bit lower, as Lauren outlined. We charge higher premiums. Microinsurance is very accessible to lower income individuals. So that's kind of a key difference. Our underwriting processes and our claims processes are relatively more extensive compared to those with microinsurance. And of course, distribution. Our protection products are distributed through many of you in this room with financial advice to really tailor it to that individual. Whereas microinsurance, as Lauren outlined, can be distributed in lots of different ways: mobile phones, community leaders, etc. So there are lots of very interesting differences. And while I suppose microinsurance, perhaps as we define it today and as we've thought of it, might not work perfectly in the UK market, there are some very good aspects of the cover. Namely, and given the title of this session, just how inclusive it is as a financial services offering. And I think while there are clearly lots of differences between regular insurance and microinsurance, one thing is true of both. But in both markets, we have financially vulnerable customers with protection needs. Microinsurance, I remember Lauren's slide, equals inclusive insurance. It was designed to be inclusive. Which I think it is in terms of access. And you could argue that in the UK, our protection products perhaps aren't as inclusive as they could be, particularly for those on lower incomes or those that present a higher risk. And why is that? So let's dive in, excuse the pun, to the risk pool to explore why that is. And I hope this kind of fake-looking but warm, welcoming swimming pool is providing a bit of a smile as we sit in a kind of dark conference room on a damp November day. But this is the risk pool, and what would an inclusive risk pool look like? So I think of microinsurance kind of being represented by this. So it's a pool that is for everyone. So anyone can get in. It's accessible in terms of cost and product design, cover across the ages, genders, health histories, affordable, for everybody. Lots of different risks in that pool, a very heterogeneous risk pool. So from an insurer perspective, you would expect to see nice, stable claims experience. No or limited underwriting, no exclusions. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Of course, there are some downsides to this. So, you've got maybe a more generic product, which might not meet everybody's personal needs in that pool. And from an underwriting perspective, they face the risk that perhaps it attracts more high-risk individuals to the pool, or the pool isn't quite big enough, so the law of large numbers doesn't apply, and the claims experience isn't as desirable as hoped. So this is the pool, I think, that represents microinsurance. So how do things work then in the UK? So we also have a big pool of customers that we can cover, and excuse the pretty basic paint work there, but we have mini pools within our big pool, and we cover people in slightly different ways. So several pools of very, very similar risks. And this is all, basic stuff everybody in this room will be aware of. We have those who we cover with standard rates, those that we charge more to, those that we change the policy and apply exclusions to, and those who we say, we can cover you possibly, but in the future, people are still sitting on their rubber rings waiting to get into the water. In each pool, insurers have a really good understanding of the risk. They're able to price really accurately in those pools. The claims experience in each pool is stable. So insurers are protected from a profitability perspective. Anti-selection is reduced because the application processes are quite extensive and protect insurers. And there's very little cross-subsidization. So people are paying a price that represents their risk. So you could say that it works for insurers for now, but more on that. But there are some downsides for the customer. So as we get more and more accurate with our risk pricing, and we get more extensive with our underwriting, and I know underwriting's been a theme throughout, we ultimately end up declining some people. So that is probably the opposite of inclusive. And of course, those who were in the water and in the standard pool are probably feeling pretty happy, pretty all right. They're paying a decent price. They've got the policy that they want. But the others might be paying a bit more than they'd like. They might not have the policy exactly that they would want to have. So there are some downsides for the customer. But we've got to this place because the UK market is primarily a price-driven market. And thanks to advanced risk analytics, we can assess risk on a really granular level today and get a very accurate picture of risk, which is a good thing. But it does mean that we get this segmentation, and it does potentially present a bit of a challenge in terms of inclusivity. So is this approach good for insurers but bad for customers? Well, I don't think it's quite that simple. I think there are pros and cons of this approach to both parties. And context, I think, is important here. So perhaps this picture looks okay as long as the majority of our customers sit in the standard pool. And these are the IP underwriting stats, and that is the case. And of course, if we had life only here, it might look even more favourable. So perhaps we can say that that's all right. But let's think forward a bit. Let's think about Gen Z, and actually I should probably move on from Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and our future customers who are coming through. So inclusivity really does matter. The picture at the moment might look okay, but inclusivity is huge, because without thinking in an inclusive way, we as an industry risk a shrinking customer base and shrinking new business volumes, because our customers are changing, and we've heard that from Pauline. Many interesting stats there, impactful stats. And I think there are two things that could happen here if we think particularly of younger generations coming in to buy protection. Firstly, it's that younger generations are going to be buying in different ways to how our current customers have bought. They might not be seeking financial advice, or they might not have the trigger, that mortgage conversation, to actually have that protection conversation. So we risk a world where the overall customer base, the overall pool, is getting smaller. The second thing that happens is that for people who come into the pool, we might see a shift or a change in the underwriting outcomes, because younger generations are consuming health services differently. They are facing mental health, huge mental health challenges, and actually doing things about those. But do our underwriting sets today really allow for that and capture that changing kind of picture of risk? So if both of these things played out in reality, surely this would be a bad thing for customers and a bad thing for insurers. But enough of the negativity and the problems. Let's bring some optimism back in and move on to solutions. So I'm certainly not in protection distribution, nor am I an experienced underwriter. So I'm not going to stand up here and comment on how we sell via TikTok to Gen Z or Gen Alpha, or how we adjust underwriting question sets to allow for the new risk characteristics and interactions coming through. But I am an actuary, and I know Joe made a comment, and Peter historically has made comments about actuaries, and I don't think it has to be actuarial versus human. I don't think it has to be this or that. I think there is an approach where actuaries, insurers can think in a different way to be more inclusive. I think that's absolutely possible. So let's, conscious of time, so let's kind of whiz through. So I think what we need to do is find a way to offer inclusive products to more customers, so appeal to enough people, get the volumes in, whilst also maintaining profitability and sustainability for insurers. So this is a very, very simplistic view. And I think there are two possible approaches you could take here. So approach one is that insurers create more and more mini pools within that wider pool. So they allow for the new risk characteristics coming through of future generations, future customers, and they keep at a granular level in terms of pricing and assessing risk. So in this case, you're getting more people into the pool, people who may have been declined, but you're still segmenting. So there will still be people who pay perhaps more than they would like to pay. So you might still have a volume challenge from an insurer perspective, but the profitability is probably about right. The other option is that you take a leaf out of the microinsurance book, you take inspiration there, and you get rid of the mini pools altogether. And you say, okay, we're going to open up the pool, we're going to cover everyone in an affordable way. Now that's clearly good from an inclusivity perspective, the new business volumes, but it is a risk for insurers. They've got, risk of higher risk customers getting into the pool, and potentially lower profitability. So clearly neither of these solutions work perfectly, and there are risks to the insurer of both of these approaches. In the white dot, it's the risk of not being able to generate sufficient volumes. In the darker dot, it's the risk of actually being anti-selected against and not having the right mix of people in that pool. I think as we often say with mental health, I think this is probably too black and white, and the answer is somewhere in the grey. So I think the sweet spot's somewhere in the middle, a perfect balance of granular risk assessment to ensure the business is profitable and sustainable for insurers, and aggregate pricing to cover more people and be more affordable. So this is just one idea, and hopefully it sparks some kind of new ideas amongst people in the room today on how we could think differently. So the approach could be that insurers continue to be very hyper accurate and granular with their assessment of risk. So when it comes to claims, you get that data, you use the advanced technology, and you understand that accurate picture of risk, which is absolutely, seems like the right thing to do to get that. But here's the difference when it comes to pricing. So traditionally, what we've done in the market is overlay our pricing on top of that granular picture of risk. We get a granular set of premiums that's very personalized and tailored to a specific risk profile, but comes with that inclusivity challenge. So an alternative could be that we actually calculate price we take kind of an aggregate view of price. So we price for a whole risk of people, however you want to define that risk of people. Same price for everyone in that pool at an affordable level. Yes, that represents risk. That means there's business mix risk. It would require regular monitoring of business mix, claims experience, and probably regular reprices to make sure that risk exposure was managed. And I think it's about finding, this isn't the only answer, this is just one possible thing to think about, but it's about finding that perfect sweet spot between the optimum between volume and inclusivity versus risk exposure for the business. This is no small task. You need actuarial systems and infrastructure to support this kind of regular monitoring and activity. And thanks to technology and advances that we have seen, it is something that might have been impossible in the past, is now very much possible. And there are, of course, market dynamics at play. We are in a price competitive market, and price drives a lot of our decisions and the things that we do in this space. So this would have to be carefully considered if you were to take an aggregate view on pricing. There is risk with this approach for insurers, but perhaps the answer is to take some risk, because I actually think to be inclusive, it does require some risk taking. I'm also conscious that some of the insurers in the room might be doing this to some degree already, but for those who aren't, I hope it's provided just some food for thought. Thank you for listening.